The moment my 8-year-old son Dexter spoke those words in the hospital room, pointing at the nurse's cart, I watched my mother-in-law's face drain of all color. She had just told me God saved the world from my bloodline after my newborn supposedly died. But Dexter knew something none of us were supposed to know. My name is Nadine Hartley, and I'm 32 years old. 3 hours ago, I was told my baby boy Theodore had died during delivery. 3 hours ago, my mother-in-law Dolores looked me straight in the eye while I sobbed and said those exact words, "God saved this world from your bloodline." My sister-in-law Francine nodded like it was the most natural thing to say to a grieving mother. My husband Preston couldn't even face me. He just stood with his back turned, his shoulders rigid, as if my grief was something shameful he couldn't bear to witness. But then Dexter walked in. My beautiful, observant 8-year-old boy who notices everything adults think they're hiding. He took one look around that hospital room, studied each face, and then his eyes landed on the medical cart the nurse had left behind. That's when he asked the question that changed everything. Should I give the doctor what Grandma hid in my baby brother's milk? The room went silent. Not the kind of quiet that comes from respect or sadness, but the suffocating silence of people who've been caught. Dolores gripped her purse so tight her knuckles went white. Francine's hand flew to her mouth, and Preston finally turned around, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. "What are you talking about, sweetheart?" Dolores tried to keep her voice steady, but I heard the crack in it. After 7 years of marriage to her son, I knew every tone, every inflection she used to manipulate situations. Dexter walked closer to the cart, his small finger pointing at a baby bottle partially hidden behind some medical supplies. "The drops, Grandma." "From the little brown bottle in your purse. You said they were vitamins for Mommy, but you put them in the baby bottle instead. I saw you do it when you thought I was playing with my tablet." My sister Cordelia, who had brought Dexter to the hospital, immediately moved toward the cart. She's a pediatric nurse herself, and something in her expression shifted from sympathy to professional alertness. "Nadine, has anyone given the baby anything besides formula or breast milk?" "The baby is gone," Dolores interrupted sharply. "There's no point in discussing feeding schedules now." But Dexter shook his head, that stubborn set to his jaw that he inherited from me. "No, Grandma. I heard him crying when Aunt Cordelia drove me here. We passed the big window with all the babies, and I heard my brother. I know his cry because I heard it right after he was born, before you sent me to the waiting room." The nurse who had been so kind to me throughout my pregnancy, Bethany, appeared in the doorway. She had obviously been listening from the hallway. Her face was pale, and she kept glancing between Dolores and the cart. "Mrs. Hartley," she said to me, her voice trembling, "I need to check something in the nursery right now." "There's nothing to check." Dolores stood up, her 5'8" frame trying to be imposing. At 58, she still carried herself like the small-town dynasty she believed her family to be. "My grandson passed away due to complications. Dr. Reeves has already signed the necessary paperwork." But I was already trying to sit up, fighting through the fog of medication and grief. "Where's my baby? Where is Theodore?" Preston finally spoke, his voice uncertain. "Nadine, Mom said the doctor confirmed it. The baby couldn't breathe on his own." "Then why won't they let me see him?" I grabbed Cordelia's hand, my lifeline to sanity. What kind of hospital doesn't let a mother see her baby, even if he's gone? Dexter tugged on Cordelia's jacket. "Aunt Cordy, should I tell them about the other thing?" "What other thing, buddy?" Cordelia knelt beside him, her emergency room training kicking in as she recognized a child with crucial information. Grandma had a doll in her big bag, the special bag she brought from home, not her regular purse. It looked like a real baby. She showed it to Aunt Francine in the parking lot and said something about insurance. I was in the back seat, and they didn't know I could hear them. Francine's face went from pale to ashen. "Mom, tell them that's not true." But Dolores was already backing toward the door, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "You're listening to the fantasies of a confused child. This is a difficult day for everyone." That's when Bethany, the nurse, made her move. She grabbed the bottle Dexter had pointed to and held it up to the light. A few drops of milk were still visible inside, but there was something else, too. A faint residue that shouldn't have been there. "Security to maternity ward, immediately," she spoke into her phone, her eyes never leaving Dolores. "And someone get Dr. Reeves here now. Not the one on duty, but Dr. Martinez from Pediatrics." The next words out of Dexter's mouth made my blood run cold and my heart surge with hope at the same time. "Mommy, I think my baby brother is still alive, and I think Grandma didn't want him to be." My life before that hospital room seemed like it belonged to someone else entirely. Just 6 months ago, I thought I had built something solid with Preston. We lived in a colonial-style house on Maple Street, the kind with white shutters and a wraparound porch that Preston's mother, Dolores, had picked out for us. She said it was her wedding gift, but gifts from Dolores always came with invisible strings that slowly tightened around your neck. I met Preston at a marketing conference in downtown Chicago. He was presenting for his family's chain of medical supply companies, and I was there representing the small nonprofit where I worked, coordinating fundraising events. He was charming in that understated way, with sandy brown hair that flopped over his forehead when he got animated about something. During his presentation, the projector failed, and instead of panicking, he laughed and said, "Well, I guess we're doing this the old-fashioned way," and proceeded to give the most engaging talk, using nothing but a whiteboard and his natural charisma. We dated for a year before he proposed. During that time, I met Dolores exactly 3 times, and each meeting felt like a job interview I was failing. She would ask about my family with a smile that never reached her eyes. "So, your father works in construction? How interesting." Preston's grandfather built half the commercial district here. Or she'd comment on my education. "State school? Well, not everyone can afford private education. You've done well considering your circumstances." Preston would squeeze my hand under the table during these dinners, his silent way of saying, "Ignore her." But he never actually told her to stop. That should have been my first warning sign. When we married, Dolores insisted on planning everything. My simple garden wedding idea was transformed into a country club spectacle, with ice sculptures and a string quartet. "We have a reputation to maintain," she said, when I protested the $50,000 price tag. What would people think if Preston Hartley's wedding looked cheap? The first year was manageable because Preston and I lived in the city, 40 minutes from his family. But when I got pregnant with Dexter, Dolores launched her campaign to move us closer. "A baby needs family around," she insisted, "and that neighborhood isn't suitable for raising children." Our neighborhood was perfectly safe, with good schools and parks, but it wasn't the right kind of neighborhood in her eyes. So we moved to Riverside, where the Hartley family owned 3 of the 5 major businesses in town. Preston's daily commute tripled, but Dolores was happy. She could drop by whenever she wanted, which turned out to be nearly every day. Dexter was born on a snowy December morning, and from the moment he arrived, he was different from what Dolores expected. Where Preston had been a quiet, compliant baby according to family legend, Dexter was alert and watchful. Even as an infant, his dark eyes would track conversations like he understood every word. By age 2, he was asking questions that made adults uncomfortable. "Why does Grandma smile when she's angry?" he asked once, and I had to hide my laugh in a cough. Dolores tried to mold him the way she'd molded Preston and Francine, but Dexter had my stubborn streak and something else entirely his own, an inability to pretend things were fine when they weren't. When Dolores would criticize my cooking in her sugar-sweet voice, Dexter would pipe up, "Mommy's food tastes good, Grandma. Maybe your tongue is broken." The pregnancy with Theodore wasn't planned. Preston and I had been growing distant, the weight of his family's constant presence in our marriage creating cracks we couldn't seem to repair. When I showed him the positive test, his first words weren't of joy or even surprise. They were, "What will Mom say?" Dolores's reaction was worse than I expected. She sat in our living room, her pearl necklace catching the light as she processed the news. "Another baby? So soon? Dexter is only 7, and with your family history of health issues?" "What health issues?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Oh, didn't Preston tell you? I had some research done into your family tree. For genetic purposes, you understand. There's quite a bit of alcoholism, some mental instability. Your great-aunt was institutionalized, wasn't she? She had twisted a story about my great-aunt's postpartum depression in the 1960s into something sinister. That's what Dolores did best: take kernels of truth and grow them into poison trees. As my pregnancy progressed, her behavior became more erratic. She insisted on attending every doctor's appointment, asking strange questions about genetic testing and probability of complications. She brought articles about infant mortality rates. She suggested names like Angelo, because he might be too perfect for this world. Francine, Preston's younger sister, had never married. At 30, she still lived in the guest house on Dolores's property, working as the office manager for the family business. She parroted everything her mother said, desperate for approval that never quite came. During Sunday dinners, she'd make comments like, "Some women just aren't meant to have multiple children. It's about knowing your limitations." Preston started working later hours, missing dinner most nights. When I confronted him, he said the business was expanding and he had responsibilities. But Dexter, my little truth-teller, mentioned seeing Daddy's car at Grandma's house when the school bus passed by in the afternoons. 2 weeks before Theodore was born, I found Dolores in the nursery I'd just finished decorating. She was standing by the crib, holding a pillow, just staring at it. "Just checking the firmness," she said when I asked what she was doing. "You can never be too careful about SIDS. That night, I told Preston I wanted his mother to stay away from the delivery. He looked at me like I'd asked him to cut off his own arm. "She's my mother, Nadine. She has a right to be there for her grandchild's birth." "What about my rights?" I asked. "What about what I need?" He slept on the couch that night. It would be the last normal night of our marriage, though I didn't know it then. I lay in bed, feeling Theodore kick, and whispered to him, "Don't worry, baby. Mommy will protect you." I had no idea how those words would haunt me or how much I would fail to keep that promise, at least at first. The morning of Theodore's birth started with a thunderstorm that rattled the windows and knocked out power twice before breakfast. I should have taken it as an omen. My water broke at 6:47 a.m. while I was making Dexter's lunch for school. The pain that followed wasn't like my first labor. Something felt different, wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. Preston called his mother before he even helped me to the car. I heard him through the bathroom door as I changed clothes, trying to breathe through contractions. "Yes, Mom, we're leaving now. Yes, you can meet us there. No, I haven't called the doctor yet." By the time we reached Riverside General, Dolores was already there, talking to Dr. Reeves in the lobby. She had specifically requested him months ago, overriding my choice of doctor, Patel, who had delivered Dexter. "Dr. Reeves is the best," she'd insisted. "He delivered Preston and Francine. He understands our family." The labor progressed too quickly. Within 2 hours, I was fully dilated, but Theodore's heart rate kept dropping with each contraction. The monitors beeped their warnings while nurses rushed in and out, their faces increasingly concerned. Dr. Reeves kept checking his watch, muttering about scheduling conflicts. "We need to do a C-section," he finally announced, but his tone was oddly casual, like he was suggesting we order takeout. "The baby is showing signs of distress." "Is he going to be okay?" I gasped between contractions. "We'll do our best, Doctor," Reeves said, not meeting my eyes. Dolores stood beside him, her hand on his arm in a gesture that seemed too familiar, too rehearsed. They wheeled me into the operating room at 11:15 a.m. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia took hold was Dolores leaning over me, her breath smelling of peppermint and something medicinal. "Everything will be as it should be," she whispered. When I woke up, the room was dim and quiet. My throat was dry, my abdomen tender and bandaged. The first thing I noticed was the absence of crying. In every movie, every story, every friend's experience, you wake up to your baby's cry or to someone placing them on your chest. But there was nothing except the mechanical beep of machines and the sound of Preston's muffled voice somewhere behind me. I turned my head, fighting through the medication fog. Preston stood with his back to me, his phone pressed to his ear. Dolores sat in the corner chair with Francine beside her. They were both wearing black. Black. Who wears black to a delivery room? "Where's my baby?" My voice came out as a croak. The room shifted. Preston ended his call but didn't turn around. Dolores stood up slowly, smoothing her skirt, that practiced look of sympathy sliding across her face like a mask. "Nadine, dear, you need to rest," she said. "Where is Theodore?" "Where is my son?" Dr. Reeves entered then, his white coat pristine, his expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Hartley, I'm afraid I have difficult news. Your son experienced severe respiratory failure. We did everything we could, but he didn't survive. I'm very sorry for your loss." The words didn't make sense. They floated in the air like impossible things, like saying the sun had decided not to rise. No, that's not right. I need to see him. Bring me my baby." "That's not advisable, doctor," Reeves said quickly. "The baby's appearance might be distressing. It's better to remember him as he was meant to be." "As he was meant to be?" I tried to sit up, but the incision screamed in protest. "He was meant to be alive. He was meant to be in my arms." That's when Dolores said it, her voice clear and cold. "God saved this world from your bloodline, Nadine. Some things aren't meant to be." Francine nodded, actually nodded like this was reasonable. "Mom's right. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise. You already have Dexter." I looked at Preston, begging him with my eyes to say something, to defend me, to demand to see our son. But he just stood there, his back a wall between us, his shoulders set in that way that meant he'd made up his mind about something. "Preston, please," I sobbed. "This is our baby. Don't you want to see him? Don't you want to hold him just once?" "The arrangements need to be made," he said to the window. Not to me, to the window. "Mother has already contacted the funeral home." "Already?" The word escaped before I could stop it. "Our son has been gone for what? An hour? And she's already planning his funeral?" Dolores pulled out a folder from her purse, an actual folder with papers already filled out. "I believe in being prepared. The Riverside Funeral Home can handle everything discreetly. We don't want this to become town gossip." I started screaming then. Not words, just raw sound that came from somewhere deep and primal. A nurse rushed in with a syringe, and before I could protest, warmth spread through my IV. But before the sedative pulled me under, I noticed things that didn't fit. The bassinet in the corner had been used. There were water drops on its side and a small yellow stain that looked like formula. The warming light above it was still on. A nurse wheeled it out quickly when she saw me looking. Bethany, my favorite nurse from prenatal visits, stood in the doorway. Her eyes were red, and she kept opening her mouth like she wanted to speak but couldn't. When Dolores glared at her, she backed away, but not before I saw her mouth the word sorry to me. There was a small hospital bracelet on the side table, the kind they put on newborns. It had been cut off, not unclasped. Why would they cut it off? And why was there a bottle of formula on the nurse's card if my baby never lived long enough to feed? "Something's wrong," I whispered as the medication pulled me down. "Something's not right." "Hush now," Dolores said, patting my hand with fingers that felt like ice. "Sometimes God's plan is hard to accept, but you'll see. This is all for the best." The last thing I saw before darkness took me was Preston, finally turning around. His face wasn't grieving, it was guilty. And that's when I knew, see, even through the drugs and the pain and the impossible grief, that my baby's death was not what they were telling me. Theodore was supposed to be alive, and someone in this room had made sure he wasn't. Or at least that's what they wanted me to believe. The sedative they gave me was supposed to keep me under for hours, but a mother's instinct is stronger than any drug. I fought my way back to consciousness like swimming up from the bottom of a dark lake. My mouth tasted like metal, and my incision throbbed with every heartbeat, but my mind was clearing, sharpening with each second. The room had changed. Preston was gone. Dolores and Francine sat in the corner, speaking in low voices they thought I couldn't hear. But the medication had done something strange. It had made them think I was unconscious while leaving me aware enough to listen. "The paperwork is filed," Dolores was saying. "Dr. Reeves assured me everything looks natural. Respiratory failure is common in newborns, especially with her family history." "But Mom, what if someone checks?" Francine's voice wavered. "What if they want to do an autopsy?" "They won't. I've already had Charles at the funeral home begin the cremation paperwork. By tomorrow afternoon, there won't be anything left to examine." My heart hammered so hard I was sure they'd hear it. Cremation. Tomorrow. No mother would agree to that so quickly without even seeing her child. I forced myself to remain still, to keep my breathing steady and deep. The door opened. I recognized Bethany's voice immediately. "Mrs. Hartley needs her vitals checked. She's sedated," Dolores said sharply. "Can't this wait?" "Hospital protocol, every 2 hours post-surgery." Bethany's tone was professionally firm. I felt her warm fingers on my wrist, checking my pulse. Then she did something unexpected. She squeezed my hand 3 times, a signal. She knew I was awake. "Her pulse is elevated," Bethany announced. "I need to adjust her medication." "Is that necessary?" Dolores stood up and I heard her heels click across the floor. "We don't want her in any pain." "Of course not." Bethany moved to my 4th, but instead of adding medication, I heard her pressing buttons on the machine. "There, that should help. I'll need to check on the other patients now." As she left, she dropped something beside my bed. I heard the soft thud of paper hitting the floor. Dolores and Francine didn't notice, too absorbed in their planning. 20 minutes later, my sister Cordelia arrived with Dexter. I heard my son's voice in the hallway, arguing with someone. "I want to see my mommy, and I want to see my baby brother." "Your brother is with Jesus now," Dolores said, intercepting them at the door. "Your mommy is sleeping. You need to be quiet." But Dexter pushed past her. I felt his small hand grab mine. "Mommy, wake up. Please wake up. Something's wrong. Grandma's lying about something." I squeezed his hand just slightly. His intake of breath told me he understood. "Aunt Cordelia," he said loudly, "can you get me a juice from the machine?" "The one downstairs? Grandma, you should go with her. She doesn't know where it is." "I'm not leaving," Dolores said firmly. "Then I'll scream," Dexter said simply. "Really loud. Like that time at Christmas when you said my other grandma couldn't visit. Remember how upset everyone got?" There was a moment of tense silence. Then Cordelia spoke. "Come on, Dolores. Let's give Nadine some quiet. Francine, you too. We could all use some coffee." They left reluctantly. The moment the door closed, I opened my eyes. Dexter's face was inches from mine, his expression fierce with determination. "Mommy, I saw everything. Grandma put something in a bottle. She had this little brown bottle in her purse, and when the nurse wasn't looking, she put drops in the baby formula. She told Aunt Francine it was vitamins, but Francine looked scared." I struggled to sit up, fighting through the pain. The paper Bethany had dropped was just within reach. It was a sticky note with 4 words. "NICU baby boy Hartley." My baby was alive. He had to be. "Dexter, listen to me very carefully," I whispered. "Go find Nurse Bethany. Tell her Mommy's awake and needs her right now. Don't let Grandma see you." He nodded and slipped out. I forced myself to swing my legs over the side of the bed. The pain was excruciating, but rage is a powerful anesthetic. My baby was somewhere in this hospital, and Dolores had done something to him. The door burst open. Preston walked in, his face flushed. "What are you doing? You need to lie down." "Where is our son, Preston?" "Our real, living son?" He froze. "Nadine, you're confused. The medication. Stop lying to me." The words ripped from my throat. "I know Theodore is alive. What did your mother do? What did you let her do?" His face crumbled. For the first time since I'd known him, Preston Hartley looked lost. "She said it was for the best. She said the baby wasn't mine, that you'd been unfaithful. She had a DNA test." "From where? When? How could she have tested a baby that supposedly died within minutes?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The logic of my questions was breaking through whatever story he'd been told. Bethany rushed in with Dexter. "Mrs. Hartley, I need to check something urgently. There's been a mix-up with some paperwork." She looked meaningfully at the door. "I think we should check it immediately." I stood up, gripping her arm for support. "Take me to my baby." "You can't," Preston said weakly. "Mother said—" "I don't care what your mother said." I was done being quiet, done being polite, done pretending this family hadn't been slowly poisoning my life for years. "I'm going to find my son." Dexter ran to the nurse's cart in the corner, the one that had been there since I woke up. He reached behind the supplies and pulled out a baby bottle with a small amount of formula still in it. "This is it. Mommy, this is the bottle Grandma touched. I saw her." Bethany took it immediately, her face grim. "We need to test this. Now." She looked at Preston. "You can either help us or you can explain to the police why you didn't." Preston's phone rang. Dolores. He looked at it, then at me, then at his son holding that bottle like evidence in a crime, which it was. He declined the call. "The NICU," he said quietly. "Check the NICU. She made Dr. Reeves list him under a different name, said it was to protect our privacy while we dealt with the funeral arrangements." I was already moving toward the door, Bethany supporting me on one side, Dexter holding my other hand. Behind us, I heard Preston make a choice that should have been made years ago. "I'm calling the police," he said, "and then I'm calling my lawyer, not the family lawyer, mine." The NICU was 2 floors up, but those were the longest minutes of my life. Bethany had grabbed a wheelchair, ignoring protocol about post-surgical patients walking. Dexter ran ahead, his small feet pounding on the linoleum like a war drum. Preston followed behind us, his phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapidly to someone about hospital security and police. When the elevator doors opened, I saw Dolores standing at the NICU entrance with Dr. Reeves. She was holding paperwork, her pen poised to sign something. Francine stood beside her, crying silently. "Stop her!" I shouted, trying to stand from the wheelchair. "Don't let her sign anything." Dolores turned, her face shifting from surprise to fury. "Get her back to her room. She's hysterical from the medication." But Dexter was already running past her, straight through the NICU doors. "Where's my brother?" "Where's Theodore Hartley?" Dr. Reeves moved to block him, but Bethany stepped forward. "Dr. Martinez is on his way up. He's ordered a full stop on all paperwork for any infant admitted in the last 6 hours." She held up the bottle Dexter had found. "And hospital security has been instructed to preserve all evidence of potential poisoning." "Poisoning?" Dr. Reeves's face went white. "What are you talking about?" "Should I give the doctor what Grandma hid in my baby brother's milk?" Dexter said loudly, his clear voice carrying through the ward. "The stuff from the brown bottle in her purse?" Everything happened at once. Dolores lunged for her purse, but Cordelia, who had just arrived with hospital security, grabbed it first. The contents spilled across the floor, and there it was, a small brown dropper bottle rolling across the tiles. Dr. Martinez, the head of pediatrics, picked it up. He read the label, and his expression turned to horror. "Lorazepam. Concentrated liquid lorazepam. This is a controlled substance. In an infant's system, this would cause severe respiratory depression." "I want to see my baby," I said, standing despite the searing pain. "Where is Theodore?" A young NICU nurse stepped forward, her hands shaking. "Bay 3. The baby in Bay 3 was brought in 2 hours ago with breathing difficulties. We were told it was a different family, the Johnsons, and to limit access." I moved faster than I should have been able to. There, in an incubator surrounded by monitors, was Theodore. My Theodore. His tiny chest rose and fell with the help of oxygen support, but he was alive. His perfect fingers curled and uncurled. His eyes, when they fluttered open, were the same dark blue as Dexter's had been. "That's my baby," I whispered, pressing my hand against the incubator. "That's my son." The NICU nurse checked his chart. "The admission paperwork is strange. It says Johnson, but the hospital bracelet number matches the Hartley delivery from this morning." "Because I changed it," Dr. Reeves said suddenly, his composure finally cracking. "Dolores said the baby had a genetic condition that would destroy their family's reputation. She said it would be kinder to let everyone think he'd died. She promised to fund the new pediatric wing if I helped." "You took a bribe to fake my baby's death?" The words came out in a roar I didn't know I was capable of. Preston stepped forward, his phone still in his hand. "That's a confession. The police heard everything. They're already in the building." Dolores's carefully constructed facade shattered completely. "You don't understand. The DNA test proved he wasn't Preston's child. I was protecting our family from scandal." "What DNA test?" Dr. Martinez demanded. "Show me this test." Dolores fumbled in her folder, pulling out a document. Dr. Martinez examined it, then shook his head. "This is fraudulent. The letterhead is wrong, the testing facility doesn't exist, and no legitimate DNA test can be performed on a newborn without parental consent and proper chain of custody. But the lab technician said... Dolores stopped, realizing she was implicating herself further. You mean the lab technician you bribed? Francine spoke up suddenly, her voice hollow. The one you paid $5,000 to create a fake report? I have the bank records, Mom. I've had them for weeks. I couldn't let you go through with it, so I called the police an hour ago. The room went silent except for the steady beep of Theodore's monitors. Dolores looked at her daughter like she'd been slapped. You betrayed me. You tried to kill a baby, Francine said simply. My nephew, an innocent baby, because you couldn't stand the thought of your perfect family being less than perfect. 2 police officers entered the NICU, followed by a detective. The bottle of lorazepam was carefully bagged as evidence. Dr. Reeves was read his rights. And Dolores, for the first time in her life, had nothing to say as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. The baby received a small dose, Dr. Martinez explained to me while chaos unfolded around us. Enough to suppress his breathing and make him appear to be in severe distress, but Nurse Bethany's quick action in moving him to NICU support saved his life. He'll make a full recovery. I looked at Bethany, who was crying openly now. I knew something was wrong when Dr. Reeves insisted on handling the delivery alone. When the baby was born, he was crying strongly, but then Dr. Reeves took him to the warming table, and Dolores was there with that bottle. I tried to stop her, but she said it was prescribed vitamins. By the time I realized what happened, the baby was barely breathing. So you hidden him, I said, understanding flooding through me. You saved him. I listed him as an emergency NICU admission and hoped someone would question the story before it was too late. I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you directly. Dolores threatened to have me fired and blacklisted if I said anything. Dexter tugged on my hospital gown. Mommy, can I meet my brother now? For real this time? The NICU nurse smiled through her tears. Let me get you both suited up. He's stable enough for family contact. As they prepared Theodore for me to hold, I watched my mother-in-law being led away in handcuffs. She turned back once, her eyes meeting mine. There was no remorse there, only rage that her plan had failed. This isn't over, she called out. I'll prove that child isn't Preston's. Preston stepped beside me, his hand tentatively touching my shoulder. Let her try. I already called for a legitimate DNA test. I don't care what the results say. Theodore is my son. Dexter is my son, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to earn forgiveness for what I almost let happen. I didn't respond. There would be time for those conversations later. Right now, all that mattered was the weight of Theodore in my arms, warm and breathing and alive. Dexter stood on tiptoe beside me, gently touching his brother's hand. I knew you were okay, Dexter whispered to Theodore. I heard you crying. Grandma lied, but babies don't lie, and neither do big brothers. Theodore's fingers wrapped around Dexter's smallest finger, holding tight. In that moment, despite everything that had happened, everything that was broken, this one thing was perfect and whole and true. My boys were together, and no one would ever separate them again. The next 18 months taught me that justice isn't always swift, but when it comes with the force of truth that can't be denied. Dolores Hartley was sentenced to 15 years for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, and bribing a public official. The judge, a grandmother herself, had no sympathy for a woman who would try to kill her own grandchild over perceived bloodline purity. Dr. Reeves lost his medical license and served 5 years. The hospital underwent a complete investigation, revealing he'd taken bribes from 3 other wealthy families over the years to alter medical records. Each case had to be reviewed, other families torn apart by his greed exposed and given closure. Francine became the surprise witness that sealed her mother's fate. She brought years of documented emotional abuse, financial records of bribes, and recorded conversations where Dolores discussed her plans. I spent 30 years afraid of my mother, Francine told the court. I won't spend another day enabling her evil. She entered intensive therapy and slowly began building her own life, free from Dolores's shadow. She sends birthday cards to the boys now, always with a simple message. Love Aunt Francine, who promises to do better. The DNA test Preston ordered proved what I'd always known. Theodore was his son. The fake report Dolores had commissioned was so poorly constructed that the prosecution used it as evidence of premeditation. She'd planned this before Theodore was even born, probably before he was conceived. In her mind, one grandchild from my inferior bloodline was already too many. Preston and I divorced, but not with the venom you might expect. He gave me full custody without a fight, the house without conditions, and a settlement that ensured the boys would never want for anything. "It's not enough," he said during our last meeting with the lawyers. "Nothing will ever be enough to make up for what I let happen." He was right. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. Preston sees the boys every other weekend now, supervised at first, then gradually earning more trust. He goes to therapy 3 times a week, working to understand how he became so enmeshed with his mother that he nearly let her kill his own child. Dexter told me last month that Daddy cried during their visit, really cried, when Theodore called him Dada for the first time. "Is Daddy getting better?" Dexter asked me that night. "He's trying," I said, because that was the truth. People can change, but trust has to be earned back slowly. Like when I broke your favorite vase and had to show you for a whole month that I could be careful. Exactly like that, but bigger. Nurse Bethany became more than just a hero in our story. She became a friend. She testified at the trial, risking her career to speak truth about what she saw. The hospital not only didn't fire her, they promoted her to head of maternity ward safety protocols. She stops by sometimes for coffee, and Theodore lights up when he sees her. Some part of him remembers, I think, that she's the one who saved him. My sister Cordelia moved in with us for those first 6 months, helping me heal both physically and emotionally. She was there for the nightmares where I dreamed Theodore had actually died. There for the panic attacks when anyone in black clothes came to the door. There for the moment when Theodore took his first real steps at 14 months, toddling straight into Dexter's arms. The town of Riverside had to reckon with the fact that their most prominent family included an attempted child killer. The Hartley businesses lost contracts. The country club revoked Dolores's lifetime membership. The church where she'd held court for decades removed her name from the dedication plaque in the fellowship hall. Preston had to rebuild the family business from scratch, this time based on merit rather than intimidation. But the real hero of this story remains Dexter. At 8 years old, he saved his brother's life by simply paying attention and speaking the truth. His school counselor told me he's become something of a legend among his classmates, the boy who stood up to the grown-ups and won. But Dexter doesn't see himself as special. "I just told what I saw," he says when people ask. "Mommy always says that telling the truth is important, even when it's scary." Last week, I watched my boys playing in the backyard. Theodore, now walking confidently, chased bubbles that Dexter blew for him. Their laughter filled the air, pure and unburdened. Theodore doesn't know his story yet. Someday, I'll tell him how his brother saved him, how a nurse risked everything for him, how his own grandmother tried to erase him from existence because of her twisted ideas about bloodline and worth. But for now, he just knows love. He knows his brother will always catch him when he falls. He knows his mommy will always fight for him. He knows that even though Daddy lives somewhere else, he loves him too. The morning Dolores was sentenced, she said one last thing to me. "That child will be your downfall." She was wrong. Theodore, like Dexter, is my strength. They're proof that love is stronger than hate, that truth defeats lies, and that sometimes the smallest voices speak the loudest truths. I learned that family isn't about bloodlines or surnames or maintaining appearances. It's about who shows up when the truth needs telling. It's about 8-year-old boys who notice when grandmothers put strange drops in baby bottles. It's about nurses who risk their careers to save strangers' babies. It's about sisters who hold you while you scream and rebuild your ability to trust. Some people say, I should forgive Dolores for the boys' sake. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean allowing evil back into our lives. My boys are growing up knowing that some actions are unforgivable, that some people choose darkness, and that it's okay to build walls against those who would harm you. Theodore just turned 2 last month. At his birthday party, with just our small chosen family around us, he blew out his candles with Dexter's help. As I watched them, I thought about that horrible day in the hospital when I thought I'd lost him forever. Dolores tried to steal this moment and every moment after it, but she failed. Because good people spoke up. Because an 8-year-old boy loved his brother before he even met him. Because truth, even when it's whispered by a child pointing at a nurse's cart, is more powerful than all the lies money can buy. My name is Nadine Hartley, and I'm the mother of 2 boys who lived. Both of them. Despite everything, we lived. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story resonated with you or reminded you that truth always finds a way to surface, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they're not crazy for questioning what doesn't feel right. Leave a comment below about a time when someone unexpected stood up for the truth in your life. And please subscribe to our channel where we share real stories of survival, justice, and the unexpected heroes who sometimes come in the smallest packages. Remember, your instincts are there for a reason. Trust them. And teach your children that their voices matter, no matter how small they are. Sometimes an 8-year-old pointing at a nurse's cart can save a life. Until next time, keep speaking your truth.